He pushed her into the water, calm, cold, and silent. No hesitation, no remorse, just a calculated shove and a whisper. Oops. The moonlit pool closed over her like a grave. But what he didn't know was that someone saw everything. Not a neighbor, not a camera, a Labrador. Stories like this aren't born in dark alleys. Sometimes they unfold in mansions with rose gardens, champagne glasses, and well-practiced smiles. This is not just a tale of cruelty. It's about a girl no one thought would survive, and the dog who refused to let her die. Do you believe in instinct? In loyalty so fierce it claws through steel fences and dives into icy waters? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were Cooper? Make sure you stay until the very end. I've got a little gift waiting for you there. Now, let's go back and see how this story really began. The late afternoon sun cast a deceptive golden glow over the Beaumont estate, its manicured lawn sprawling towards the azure, man-made lake by the infinity pool, designed to merge seamlessly with the larger body of water beyond. A carefully constructed tableau of domestic bliss was on display. Victor Beaumont, a man whose charm was as polished as the Italian marble beneath his feet, was the picture of paternal devotion. Sarah, his wife, watched with a soft, albeit tired, smile as Victor tended to Grace, her 8-year-old daughter. Grace, small for her age and with an elfin fragility that tugged at Sarah's heart, was positioned in a specially designed therapeutic chair near the water's edge. Her movements were tentative, a lingering consequence of the accident that had stolen her father and, in a way, her carefree childhood. Victor, ever attentive when Sarah's gaze was upon him, was ostensibly guiding Grace through some gentle water therapy exercises, his voice a low, soothing murmur. "You see, darling," Victor said, his voice rich and smooth as he glanced up at Sarah, his smile radiating warmth. "The air here, this tranquility, it's so good for her. Our little Grace looks so much brighter already. Doesn't she?" He dipped a hand into the cool water, flicking a few droplets playfully towards Grace, who offered a weak, hesitant smile in return. Sarah nodded, a wave of gratitude washing over her. Victor had been a rock, a provider, a steady hand when her world had shattered. A little later, Sarah's attention drifted. Her phone buzzed from the nearby patio table. A call from her sister. As she turned, her voice a soft melody discussing mundane family matters. Victor seized his moment. He was ostensibly adjusting Grace's position, perhaps to get a toy that had drifted close to the pool's edge. "Just let me get that for you, sweetie," he cooed, his movements smooth and practiced. With a subtle, almost imperceptible nudge to the reinforced wheels of Grace's chair, he sent it gliding a fraction too close to the submerged steps. The front casters dipped. The chair tilted precariously. Grace's small gasp morphed into a choked scream of pure terror. Her tiny hands, usually lax, clamped onto the armrests with surprising strength, her face a mask of chalky white. "Mommy!" Sarah spun around, her own phone clattering to the ground. "Oh my God! Grace, what happened?" Her heart leaped into her throat as she sprinted towards the pool, her mind a blur of panic, faster than she could have imagined. Victor was there, lunging dramatically, his hand securing the chair, pulling it back from the brink. He presented a convincing show of alarm, his chest heaving. "It's okay, darling, it's okay," he panted, his voice tight with feigned fear, then laced with an equally feigned wave of relief. "Just a moment of carelessness on my part. The wheels, they just slipped. Soit nua thi. Oh, thank God I reacted quickly." He turned to Grace, his brow furrowed with deep concern. "Are you all right? My little angel, did you get a fright?" He ran a hand over her hair, his touch seemingly gentle. "Sarah, breathless and trembling, sank to her knees beside Grace's chair, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "Oh, sweetie, are you okay? Mommy's here." She looked up at Victor, her eyes wide with residual fear. "Victor, thank you. Oh, I shouldn't have looked away." A pang of self-reproach hit her. "Nonsense. My love," Victor said, his voice still carrying a tremor that Sarah mistook for shock. "These things happen. The important thing is she's safe." But as Sarah turned her full attention back to comforting Grace, fussing over her and checking for any harm, Victor's gaze drifted towards the shimmering surface of the pool. For the briefest of moments, unseen by his wife, a chillingly sinister smile touched his lips. It was a fleeting expression, quickly masked, but his eyes, as they lingered on the water, held a strange, calculating amusement, a flicker of dark satisfaction. The depths looked inviting, dangerous. The incident, quickly brushed aside by Victor's reassurances, served only to amplify his performance. He redoubled his efforts, his attentiveness to Grace almost cloying. Later, as the sun began to dip, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, he brought Sarah a cool drink, his arm draping solicitously around her shoulders. "I want Grace to have the best, Sarah. You know that," he murmured, his voice a silken caress. "This house, this beautiful lake, the pool, it's all for her happiness, her comfort, to give her experiences she might otherwise miss." Grace's condition was a constant source of anxiety for Sarah. The girl was prone to occasional, unpredictable seizures, a grim legacy of the traumatic brain injury she'd sustained in the car crash that had killed her biological father. It was, in part, Victor's apparent financial stability and his seemingly unwavering commitment to Grace's well-being that had convinced Sarah to marry him. She'd believed, desperately wanted to believe, that he could provide the specialized care and secure environment her daughter so desperately needed. Each tremor, each distant look in Grace's eyes sent a fresh wave of worry through Sarah, a constant, humming undercurrent to her days. Victor, however, harbored a vastly different perspective. When Sarah wasn't present, his carefully constructed facade would crack. Grace, in his eyes, was not a child to be cherished, but a cumbersome obstacle, a drain on resources and, more importantly, on Sarah's attention, which he craved exclusively. Almost a good start to the plan, he'd thought with a grim internal satisfaction after the poolside accident, as he'd watched Grace, pale and shaken, later that evening. But it must be handled with more finesse. Sarah must never suspect a thing. This child, this incessant, whining burden, she's an impediment to everything I truly desire. The only creature in the Beaumont household who seemed to perceive Victor's true nature was Cooper, Grace's devoted Labrador retriever, a creature of unwavering loyalty. Cooper was Grace's shadow, his warm, furry presence, a constant comfort. Since the incident by the pool, the dog's demeanor towards Victor had subtly shifted. Whenever Victor approached Grace, Cooper would often materialize, a silent, watchful guardian. Sometimes, a low, almost inaudible rumble would vibrate in his chest, or he would pointedly position his sturdy body between the girl and her stepfather. Victor found Cooper's vigilance intensely irritating. "Get lost, you damn mutt!" He'd snarl under his breath if Sarah was out of earshot, his smile tightening into a grimace, always lurking, stinking up the place, sticking your wet nose where it doesn't belong. He frequently found excuses to confine the dog, either to the utility room or on a short leash in the expansive yard. Far from Grace, but Grace and Cooper had their secrets. When Victor's attention was diverted, Grace would share morsels of her food with the dog, her small fingers stroking his soft ears, whispering her childlike fears and dreams into his patient fur. Cooper, in turn, had a peculiar habit, one possibly instilled by Olivia, the kindly part-time caregiver who came twice a week, or perhaps born of pure canine instinct. He would always meticulously sniff the water at the edge of the pool before Grace was allowed near it for her therapy sessions, sometimes letting out a soft whine if something seemed amiss to his sensitive nose. Victor's malevolence was not born of simple irritation. It was rooted in a far more sinister ambition. The Beaumont fortune, primarily Sarah's inheritance, was his ultimate prize. Grace, with her ongoing medical needs and her unbreakable bond with Sarah, was a significant complication. His impatience was further fueled by a clandestine affair. A younger woman, ambitious and demanding, was a silken voice on the other end of discreet phone calls, her allure a potent drug, her whispers painting a future free of inconvenient familial ties, urging him to simplify his life. The pressure was mounting. Victor began to meticulously craft a plan, something that would appear tragic yet unavoidable. He started by subtly planting seeds of doubt in Sarah's mind about Grace's current environment. "My love," he began one evening, his tone one of profound, thoughtful concern, his gaze fixed on the distant, darkening lake, the pool now a silent, obsidian mirror under the twilight. "I've been thinking a great deal about Grace, about her future. Perhaps we should consider a more specialized environment for her. I've heard of an excellent residential school, quite a distance away, I admit, but renowned for its work with children who have unique needs. They offer comprehensive care, round-the-clock support. It might be, in the long run, not only better for her development, but safer, too." Sarah's immediate reaction was a visible tightening, a flicker of pain in her eyes. "Safer, Victor. What do you mean? Send her away." So far, the thought of being separated from Grace was a physical ache. Victor was ready, his words smooth, placating, expertly manipulative. He spoke of advanced therapies, peer interaction with similarly challenged children, and relieving Sarah of the immense daily pressures. He painted it as an act of ultimate love, a sacrifice for Grace's long-term benefit. Sending her away is one option. Victor mused later that night, staring out at the moonlit water from their bedroom window. Sarah was asleep, her breathing soft beside him. Clean, relatively simple, but time-consuming. Alternatively, his gaze drifted towards the pool, a dark, knowing glint in his eyes. That pool. It's not a bad idea at all, if things are arranged cleverly and definitively. Thus, as the days shortened and a subtle chill began to creep into the late summer air, Victor Beaumont continued his impeccable performance as the loving husband and devoted stepfather. But beneath the veneer, a meticulous and ruthless plan was taking shape. He studied Sarah's routines, her rare absences from the estate, the caregiver's schedule. Sarah, though a tiny seed of unease had been planted by the poolside incident and the unsettling suggestion of a distant school, found her anxieties soothed and dismissed by Victor's unwavering charm and seemingly rational arguments. She clung to the image of the man she believed she had married, the savior in her time of need. Grace, however, with the unclouded intuition of a child who has known profound loss, felt the shift. Victor's smiles rarely reached his eyes when he looked at her now. His touch, however gentle it appeared, felt cold. She clung ever tighter to Cooper, the dog's steady warmth and quiet vigilance, her only true bulwark against a growing, unspoken dread. The magnificent pool, once a source of tentative pleasure, now loomed in her periphery as a place of whispered warnings, a shimmering, beautiful surface concealing a terrifying, unknown depth. An unspoken premonition hung heavy in the air. A cruel design, intimately connected with the tranquil water, was nearing its execution. The lingering warmth of summer was gradually surrendering to an autumnal crispness. a subtle shift that Victor Beaumont mirrored in his own meticulously orchestrated behavior. His outward concern for Grace took on a new, focused intensity, particularly concerning her time outdoors, the fresh air. "Sarah, it's vital for her lungs, for her spirits," he'd pronounce with an air of unshakable conviction, his gaze sweeping over the expansive grounds, always seeming to settle on the shimmering expanse of the pool. He insisted Grace spend more time on the stone patio, her therapeutic chair positioned strategically, often closer to the water than Sarah herself might have placed it. In reality, these sun-dappled afternoons were Victor's reconnaissance missions. He observed the way the light fell at different hours, the patterns of the wind across the water's surface, the secluded corners of the property least visible from the house or the distant road. He noted Sarah's habits when she was most likely to be absorbed in a phone call, when fatigue made her less observant, when the part-time caregiver, Olivia, was present, and, crucially, when she was not. He needed Grace and, by extension, Sarah, to become accustomed to the pool as a regular, benign backdrop to their afternoons, lulling any residual wariness into a comfortable complacency. To further ensure an uninterrupted opportunity, Victor engineered a minor domestic crisis, the sophisticated control panel for the estate's irrigation system. A complex piece of technology Sarah had taken a particular interest in programming herself for her prized rose gardens, suddenly malfunctioned. Victor, feigning utter incompetence after trying to fix it, managed to make the problem worse. "Darling, I'm terribly sorry," he'd said, showing her the stubbornly blank screen, his face a mask of contrition. "It seems I've only made it sputter. You're the only one with the delicate touch for these things, and I believe that specialty supplier in Westbury, the one you mentioned, is the only place that stocks that particular relay switch if it needs replacing. They close rather early, don't they?" He knew Sarah's meticulous nature would compel her to address it personally and promptly. The night he chose was cloaked in an inky, moonless black. The stars scattered across the vast canvas like cold, distant diamonds. It was perfect. Sarah, stressed from a fruitless late-afternoon trip to Westbury, the supplier had, of course, just closed as she arrived. A detail Victor had ensured by subtly misinforming her of their hours, and then further frustrated by the still-dead irrigation panel. Had retired to her room early, a tension headache throbbing at her temples. Victor had offered her a soothing herbal tea, perhaps laced with something a little stronger than chamomile, ensuring her descent into a deep, untroubled sleep. The pool area was eerily quiet, the usual ambient lighting dimmed to a few strategically placed, low-wattage lamps that cast long, dancing shadows, making the water look like a fathomless void. Cooper, who would normally be a furry, comforting presence at Grace's bedside by this hour, had been deliberately shut in the laundry room at the far end of the house after a mess Victor had staged earlier. His barks of protest had long since subsided into resentful silence. Victor moved with a predator's stealth to Grace's room. He pushed the door open a crack, a sliver of hallway light falling on the small, sleeping form. He entered, his expensive leather shoes making almost no sound on the plush carpet. He touched her shoulder gently, his voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Grace, Grace, my sweet girl. Wake up for a moment." Grace stirred, her eyes fluttering open, clouded with sleep and an instinctive flicker of apprehension when she saw his shadowy form. "Come out with Daddy for a moment," Victor murmured, his tone unnervingly tender. "The stars, Grace, they're magnificent tonight, absolutely breathtaking. Let's go out onto the patio by the pool, just for a little while, and watch them. The air is so lovely and still." Grace hesitated, pulling her thin blanket closer. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. The pool at night. It felt different, scarier. "Mommy's sleeping," she whispered, her voice small. "Shh. Yes, "Mommy's very tired," Victor crooned, his smile not quite reaching his eyes in the dim light. "This will be our little secret, just for a little while. Sweetheart, it's been so long since Daddy and you had some quiet time together. Just us. I want to show you the Big Dipper and Orion's belt. You'd like that, wouldn't you?" He extended a hand. A tiny, desperate ember of hope flickered within Grace. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe he did want to spend time with her. The longing for a father's affection, any affection, was a powerful current, strong enough to pull her against the tide of her fear. Hesitantly, she allowed him to help her from her bed and into her lightweight transit chair, her small, frail body dwarfed by his presence. He wheeled her out through the silent house, the click of the patio door unnaturally loud in the stillness. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of chlorine and damp earth. Victor pushed her chair towards the far edge of the pool, a section he knew was deeper, with smooth, tiled sides and no easily accessible steps. The dimmed lights cast an unsettling, underwater glow on the rippling surface. "Now then," he said, his voice still soft, almost reverent as he gestured towards the star-dusted sky. "Look up there, Grace. See that bright one? Unwavering. That's the North Star. And over there," he pointed, maneuvering her chair a little closer to the edge. "See those stars that form a sort of ladle? That's the Big Dipper. And if you follow its handle, you can sometimes find—" His voice was a hypnotic drone, painting pictures in the cosmos, drawing her gaze upwards, away from the dark water inches from her wheels. Grace, momentarily captivated by the celestial display and the rare, focused attention from Victor, leaned forward slightly, her earlier unease momentarily forgotten. This was what she'd always wanted, a moment of shared wonder. It was then, as she was completely absorbed, pointing a small finger at a cluster of stars she thought resembled a butterfly, that Victor acted. He was behind her chair, a dark silhouette against the faint starlight. There was no warning, no change in his breathing, just a sudden, brutal exertion of force. His hands, strong and resolute, slammed into the back of her chair. A single, chillingly soft phrase escaped his lips, a whisper lost almost immediately to the night. "Goodbye, my dear little obstacle." A strangled cry, more animal than human, was torn from Grace's throat as the chair tipped. And then she was falling, an endless, terrifying descent into the icy shock of the water. It closed over her head, a suffocating black blanket. Panic, absolute and overwhelming, seized her. She flailed, her small, weak limbs churning uselessly. Water flooded her mouth, her nose, burning her lungs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see. Disoriented, she clawed at the water, desperate for purchase, for air. Breaking the surface for a fleeting second, she gasped, choking. "Daddy," the word was a strangled, watery plea. "Help! Help me! I can't swim." Her eyes, wide with terror, found his form standing impassively at the edge of the pool. Victor Beaumont stood perfectly still, his hands now clasped loosely behind his back. He watched, his face an unreadable mask in the dim light, as the small figure thrashed, as her struggles became weaker, her cries fainter. There was no flicker of concern, no move to help, only a detached, clinical observation, perhaps in the deepest, most twisted recesses of his mind. A sliver of sick satisfaction uncoiled as he saw his problem slowly, inexorably, being solved. Grace's head slipped under again. The cold was seeping into her bones, her energy fading with terrifying speed. The starlit sky above, once a canvas of wonder, was now a distant, mocking blur. Her small hands reached out one last time, grasping at nothing but the cold, unyielding water. Despair, Black and absolute, began to claim her. Victor remained a motionless silhouette, a terrifying sentinel guarding her descent into the abyss. The only sound that dared to break the suffocating silence of the night was a sudden, distant eruption of frantic barking. Cooper, from the far end of the house, muffled but unmistakable, the Labrador's barks grew in intensity. Sharp, urgent, filled with a desperate, instinctual alarm. He must have heard Grace's scream, the distinct splash, the sound of claws scrabbling against wood, a desperate attempt to break free, a thin thread of hope in the overwhelming darkness. But Grace was sinking, the last bubbles of air escaping her lips. The glittering, indifferent stars watched on as she spiraled slowly downwards, her small world fading to black. Her fate hung precariously, suspended in the cold, silent water, with only the distant, frantic barks of a loyal friend as a counterpoint to her stepfather's chilling stillness. The tension was a palpable, crushing weight, the chilling splash, followed by Grace's single, terror-laden scream, sliced through the oppressive stillness of the night, penetrating the thick wooden door of the laundry room at the far end of the sprawling Beaumont mansion. Cooper, who had long since subsided into a fitful, resentful doze on the cold tile floor, was instantly on his feet, every muscle in his powerful Labrador body quivering, his head snapped up, ears pricked, a low, guttural growl vibrating deep in his chest. He knew that sound. He knew the unique timbre of Grace's fear. Then came the unmistakable, violent disturbance of water. It wasn't the playful splash of a daytime swim. It was something more desperate, more final, an ancient, unwavering instinct, forged through generations of loyalty and companionship, surged through him, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated protective fury. His initial low growls escalated into a volley of deep, thunderous barks, frantic, desperate, and utterly insistent. He hurled himself against the unyielding laundry room door, the solid wood shuddering under the impact of his 70-pound frame. He clawed at the door jamb, splinters flying, his nails scraping uselessly against the painted surface. The scent of Grace's fear, a phantom aroma carried on the still night air, or perhaps a figment of his heightened senses, was a torment, urging him on. Victor, in his meticulous planning, had secured the door with a heavy-duty bolt. A recent addition, he'd claimed, was for security against nocturnal wildlife. But he hadn't accounted for the unique history of this particular confinement. Years ago, when Grace was smaller and more mobile, she had often played hide-and-seek with Cooper near this very door. In her childish enthusiasm, she had repeatedly fiddled with a decorative wooden panel near the bottom, a panel that, over time, and with Cooper's occasional idle chewing, had become subtly loosened from its moorings. It was a forgotten detail, insignificant to any human eye, but to a desperate animal driven by an all-consuming need, it was a beacon of hope. Driven by a frenzy of love and desperation that bordered on the supernatural, Cooper slammed his shoulder repeatedly against that specific spot. The wood groaned, splintered, then, with a final, sharp crack, gave way. It wasn't a clean break, but a jagged, narrow opening near the floor, just enough, with a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength that seemed to defy his canine nature. He wriggled and tore his way through, the rough edges of the broken wood snagging at his thick fur, leaving a raw, bleeding scratch along his flank and tearing a small gash above his eye. He barely registered the pain, freedom, and the desperate need to reach Grace was all that mattered. The instant he was clear, he was a tawny blur, a streak of desperate energy careening through the silent, opulent corridors of the Beaumont home. His paws, usually silent on the plush runners, now scrabbled for purchase on the polished hardwood of the main hallway, his powerful nails clicking like frantic castanets. He followed the invisible thread of Grace's distress, his senses honed to a razor's edge, leading him unerringly towards the back of the house, towards the patio, towards the pool. He burst out onto the starlit flagstones, and the scene that greeted him seared itself into his canine consciousness. The dark, gaping maw of the pool, Victor a tall, unnervingly still silhouette against the faint starlight. And then Grace, a small, pale smudge, terrifyingly still, near the center of that inky expanse, her struggles having ceased, her head barely, if at all, above the waterline. She was sinking. There was no hesitation, no flicker of doubt or fear in Cooper's intelligent, amber eyes. With a sound that was part bark, part anguished cry, he launched himself from the patio edge. He hit the shockingly cold water in a powerful, driving leap, the impact sending a shower of silver droplets into the air. The cold was a brutal shock, stealing his breath for a microsecond, but the sight of Grace, so fragile, so vulnerable, propelled him forward. He swam with a strength and speed born of sheer desperation, his powerful legs churning, his sleek head cutting a determined path through the water directly towards her. Victor, jolted from his cold, predatory stillness by the sudden, unexpected cannonball of the dog, let out a startled, furious hiss. "Cooper, damn you, dog!" He took a half-step forward, an instinctive, murderous rage flashing in his eyes, a primal urge to stop this infuriating interference. But the dog was too fast, too focused. Cooper reached Grace in a matter of seconds. Her face was ghostly pale, her eyes closed, a few strands of dark hair plastered across her forehead. She was terrifyingly limp. With an almost human tenderness, he nudged her shoulder with his broad muzzle. Then, finding no response, he gripped a substantial fold of her pajama top firmly, yet gently, in his powerful jaws. He had her. The drag was immense. Grace's small body was a dead weight, and the water, so deceptively beautiful moments before, now seemed a viscous, an actively hostile force, trying to reclaim its prize. Cooper's muscles burned. His lungs screamed for air. But he did not falter. He kicked. He pulled. His entire being focused on the singular, overwhelming task of towing his precious cargo towards the faint glimmer of the submerged pool steps. He instinctively knew were her only chance. Each stroke was an agony, each breath a ragged gasp. He could feel the cold seeping into his own bones, the relentless pull of exhaustion. Victor stood frozen at the pool's edge, a statue of thwarted ambition. His initial shock had morphed into a stunned, disbelieving fury. The dog, the damned, interfering mutt, how had it gotten out? His meticulously crafted, foolproof plan was unraveling before his very eyes, undone by a creature he'd dismissed as a mere nuisance. He watched, momentarily paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the animal's intervention, his mind racing, a chaotic jumble of rage and a dawning, chilling fear. He should do something. Stop the dog. Ensure the plan reached its inevitable conclusion. But it was happening too fast. The Labrador was already near the shallow end. Any overt action now, with the dog barking intermittently. Loud, desperate summons might be disastrously conspicuous. With a final, Herculean effort, Cooper's paws found the submerged top step. He scrambled, half dragging, half heaving Grace's limp form up onto the cold, wet flagstones of the pool surround. She lay there, a small, broken doll, her skin an alarming shade of bluish purple in the eerie, dimmed light, her chest still, terrifyingly still. For a heart-stopping moment, Cooper, panting raggedly, his own body trembling with cold and exertion, feared the worst. Then he saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible flutter of her nostrils, followed by a shallow, hitched breath. Then another. She was alive, barely, A wave of something akin to profound relief, so potent it was almost painful, washed through the exhausted dog. He collapsed beside her, his wet fur pressed against her cold cheek, and began to whine, a low, continuous, mournful sound. He licked her face frantically, his warm, rough tongue trying to chafe some life back into her icy skin, to rouse her from the terrifying depths of her unconsciousness. He nuzzled her neck, nudged her arm, his entire being focused on transmitting warmth, comfort, life. Victor watched this scene, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The initial, paralyzing shock was now giving way to a cold, calculating fury, quickly followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated panic. His perfect crime, so close to its elegant, silent completion, was now a sodden, barking, breathing mess. Grace was alive. The dog was a hero, and the night was no longer silent. Cooper's barks, though now interspersed with worried whimpers as he tended to Grace, had been loud, sustained, and piercing. Had anyone heard? Sarah. He'd given her a substantial sedative, but such a prolonged, violent commotion, was it enough to penetrate her drugged slumber? Were there any groundskeepers on the estate tonight? A passing car on the distant lane. The image was seared into his mind. Grace, a tiny, fragile form lying precariously on the edge of life by the shimmering, malevolent pool. The loyal, exhausted Cooper, a furry, four-legged savior, desperately nuzzling his unresponsive mistress. And himself, Victor Beaumont, a man of immense wealth and supposed control, now standing on the precipice of ruin, his carefully constructed world threatening to shatter. His mind, usually so sharp, so adept at navigating complexities, was a maelstrom of conflicting impulses. Silence Grace permanently. Silence the dog. Flee. Concoct a story. The gears were grinding, desperately trying to recalibrate, to find a new path through the wreckage of his meticulously laid plans. The silence of the deep night was broken, the outcome terrifyingly uncertain. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here. The relentless, agitated symphony of Cooper's barks, a desperate, keening lament that now seemed to carry the very weight of canine grief, finally began to penetrate the heavy, cloying layers of the sedative-induced fog encasing Sarah's mind. It wasn't a gentle rousing. It was more akin to a series of insistent, painful jolts, each bark a physical impact against the walls of her chemically enforced slumber. For several disorienting, terrifying moments, she lay suspended in a confusing netherworld, the unfamiliar inertia of her drugged limbs a profound source of alarm. Her head throbbed with a dull, nauseating ache. Then, like a shard of ice-piercing warm flesh, a fragmented sound from earlier, a sound her subconscious had desperately tried to categorize as a mere phantasm of a troubled dream, resurfaced with horrifying, undeniable clarity. Grace's thin, high-pitched scream, abruptly cut short. This was followed, in her memory's echo, by the sickening, unmistakable thud and splash of a significant weight hitting water, a frigid dread, more potent and paralyzing than any pharmaceutical compound, began its insidious crawl up her spine, constricting her chest, making each breath a labored effort. Grace, she mumbled, the name a thick, clumsy sound on her tongue. Her limbs felt like lead, unresponsive to her increasingly frantic mental commands. She struggled to sit up, the opulent, familiar darkness of her master suite now feeling alien and menacing. Cooper's barking persisted, a frantic, unbroken chain of sound. It was too sustained, too desperate to be anything ordinary. Something was catastrophically, unthinkably wrong. A potent surge of adrenaline, the primal fuel of maternal fear, finally managed to wage a successful war against the drug's tenacious, debilitating embrace. Sarah lurched from the bed, her legs unsteady beneath her, her hand flying instinctively to her pounding temples as if to physically contain the chaos erupting within her skull. She navigated the short hallway from her bedroom suite towards the main staircase, her bare feet padding with an uncharacteristic lack of grace on the cool, polished marble. The vast, silent opulence of the house, usually a source of comfort and security, now felt like a mausoleum, each shadow seeming to writhe with unspoken horrors. The only sound was Cooper's distant, frantic summons, drawing her inexorably forward. As she descended the sweeping staircase and moved towards the rear of the house, towards the sprawling patio and the pool beyond, the night air, seeping in through a slightly ajar terrace door, struck her with a physical blow. It was damp, chilling, and carried the sharp, unmistakable chemical tang of chlorine, now sickeningly mingled with the feral, earthy scent of wet dog. The sight that confronted her when she finally reached the panoramic glass doors of the great room, overlooking the pool deck, was a tableau of such profound horror that it would forever be etched into the deepest recesses of her memory. A recurring nightmare played out in agonizing slow motion. Her daughter, her precious, fragile Grace, lay terrifyingly still, a small, pale, sodden heap on the cold, unforgiving flagstones at the pool's edge. Her vibrant pajamas were plastered to her tiny frame, making her look even more delicate, more like a broken porcelain figurine than a living child. Cooper, his usually lustrous golden coat matted and dark with pool water, his powerful flank visibly raw and streaked with blood from a jagged wound, was pressed tightly against her, his great head resting on her chest, his tongue moving in frantic, desperate licks across her ashen, unresponsive face. His whimpers were a heartbreaking symphony of canine despair. And Victor, her husband, the man she had pledged her life to, was standing several feet away, a stark, unmoving monolith against the deliberately dimmed, eerie backlighting of the pool area. His posture was unnaturally rigid, his face, mercifully, or perhaps more terrifyingly, cloaked in impenetrable shadow. He wasn't kneeling beside Grace. He wasn't attempting CPR. He wasn't on the phone to emergency services. He was simply standing, watching, a raw, guttural scream, a sound stripped of all humanity, fueled by a terror so profound it threatened to unravel her sanity, was torn from Sarah's throat. Grace. Oh, my God, my precious baby. What happened? Her fingers, numb and trembling, fumbled with the complex latch of the heavy sliding door. For an eternity, it refused to yield. Then, with a surge of desperate strength, she wrenched it open and burst onto the cold patio, her bare feet slapping against the wet stones as she sprinted towards her daughter, her heart a wild, panicked bird trapped within the cage of her ribs, threatening to shatter them with its frantic beating. Victor, what in the name of God are you just standing there for? Why are you not doing anything? Why haven't you called 911? Do something. Call 911. Now. Damn you! Call them. She collapsed to her knees beside Grace, her own body shaking uncontrollably. Her hands hovered, suspended in an agony of indecision, terrified to touch her daughter's icy, fragile form, yet consumed by an overwhelming, desperate need to offer comfort, to somehow transmit her own life force into that terrifyingly still little body. Grace's skin, where Cooper's frantic licking hadn't reached, was shockingly cold, almost waxy to the touch. Victor, finally jolted into some semblance of motion by the sheer, explosive force of Sarah's arrival and her anguished accusations spun around. His face, when it finally emerged from the shadows, was a meticulously crafted, almost theatrical mask of profound shock and utter distress. "Sarah! Oh, my dearest! Thank God you're here. I honestly don't even know. It all happened so incredibly fast." His voice, usually so smooth and resonant, was now a convincing imitation of breathless, fragmented panic. Our little Grace, she mentioned wanting to look at the stars. You know how she loves them. She was just taking a little stroll by the edge of the pool, and then her feet just seemed to go out from under her. She slipped. It was all over in an instant. He made a vague, helpless gesture with a trembling hand, a masterful performance of a man utterly undone by tragedy. "Thank God for Cooper," he choked out, his gaze flicking, with calculated effect, towards the dog, a desperate, last-ditch attempt to deflect attention, to introduce a heroic variable that might confuse the narrative and obscure his own horrifying inaction. He was like a flash. He jumped in and pulled her out before I could even fully process what had happened. The brave boy, for one long, suspended moment. Sarah, utterly overwhelmed by the grotesque, nightmarish sight of her daughter's lifeless form, by the sheer, paralyzing, ice-cold terror of the unfolding situation, could only stare, her mind a chaotic vortex of fear, disbelief, and a rapidly dawning, sickening horror. Call 911. Yes, the thought, a tiny island of rationality in a sea of emotional devastation, finally surfaced. She fumbled blindly for the sleek, waterproof satellite phone. Victor always insisted on keeping on the patio's charging station, her fingers clumsy and slippery with a combination of cold pool water and the clammy sweat of pure terror that had broken out all over her body. But even as she frantically punched in the emergency numbers, her hand shaking so violently she could barely hit the correct digits, a tiny, insistent, needle-sharp shard of profound unease began to pierce through the thick, suffocating fog of her panic. Grace, walking by the pool, voluntarily, at this ungodly hour, in her thin cotton pajamas, knowing her innate caution, her fear of the water after dark, and Victor, the man who prided himself on his decisiveness, his control, just standing there, a passive observer to his stepdaughter's drowning. Why hadn't he jumped in, a strong swimmer like him? Why was it Cooper, the family pet, who was soaked to the bone, bleeding, and clearly exhausted from a heroic rescue effort? The inconsistencies, small and disparate at first, began to coalesce, to gather like angry, dark storm clouds on the distant horizon of her rapidly clearing consciousness. It was then, as the emergency dispatcher's calm, professional voice finally answered her garbled, hysterical plea, that a memory, so sharp, so sudden, so incongruous it felt like an electric shock, cut through Sarah's consuming turmoil. The camera, oh, dear God, the little birdhouse camera, months ago, after a particularly frightening cluster of Grace's debilitating seizures, had left Sarah feeling helpless and terrified. Olivia, their kind, deeply empathetic, and wonderfully observant part-time caregiver, a woman who loved Grace with an almost maternal ferocity, had gently but persistently voiced subtle, nagging concerns about leaving Grace unsupervised, even for the briefest of moments, especially given her increasing mobility challenges and the ever-present allure and danger of the unfenced pool. Olivia, more technologically adept and practical than Sarah often gave her credit for, had quietly suggested installing a discreet, almost invisible, motion-activated security camera, one equipped with excellent night vision capabilities, its lens focused precisely and exclusively on the pool area, just for peace of mind. Sarah, Olivia had urged, her kind eyes full of genuine concern. Just so we can always be absolutely certain she's safe, especially when she's having a good day and wants a little more independence near the water. Victor, when Sarah had tentatively broached the subject, had dismissed the idea with a casual wave of his hand as overly fussy and, frankly, a bit paranoid. Darling, but Sarah, driven by a persistent, gnawing maternal anxiety that Victor's reassurances never quite managed to quell, had agreed. Olivia had sourced the tiny camera online and had helped her install it one afternoon when Victor was away on a business trip. It was nestled almost invisibly within a charming, custom-made, decorative birdhouse mounted strategically on a sturdy trellis that overlooked the entire pool deck and its immediate surroundings. Victor, Sarah was almost entirely certain, remained completely oblivious to its existence. Later, much later, after the wailing siren of the ambulance had finally faded into the pre-dawn stillness, carrying Grace towards the sterile, impersonal sanctuary of the nearest hospital emergency room. After the initial, overwhelming flurry of police questions had subsided into a more methodical, albeit still deeply unsettling, process of statement-taking. Victor, now artfully wrapped in a thick thermal blanket, his face a carefully arranged portrait of profound shock and paternal grief, was being gently comforted by a young, sympathetic uniformed officer. It was during this carefully orchestrated interlude of feigned vulnerability that Sarah, her own face a stony, impenetrable mask of forced, almost unnatural composure, quietly excused herself. She walked, not back towards the cold, echoing emptiness of the main house, but with a strange, newfound, almost somnambulistic certainty, towards the small, detached garden shed at the far end of the property. This unassuming structure, ostensibly used for storing lawn equipment and pool supplies, also discreetly housed the camera's secure recording unit and its small, dedicated monitor. Her heart hammered against her ribs with a dreadful, suffocating foreboding, each beat a sickening premonition of the horrors she was about to witness. With fingers that trembled so violently she could barely control them, she navigated the simple, user-friendly interface of the recording system. Olivia, bless her foresight, had made sure it was foolproof. She located the files from the past few hours, her eyes scanning the timestamps with a clinical detachment that felt utterly alien to her. She found the segment corresponding to the approximate time Victor had claimed the tragic accident had occurred. Her breath hitched in her throat. She pressed play. The grainy, monochrome images, stark and unforgiving in their clarity, flickered onto the small, illuminated screen. At first, there was only the familiar, yet now deeply unsettling, stillness of the deserted pool area, bathed in the ghostly, ethereal light of the distant stars and the strategically dimmed patio lamps. Then, two figures materialized from the shadows of the house Victor, his tall frame unmistakable, smoothly and confidently wheeling Grace in her transit chair. Sarah's breath caught, a painful, ragged sound in the silent shed. She watched, her blood turning to ice water in her veins, every muscle in her body tensing in horrified anticipation, as Victor guided the chair to the very edge of the deep end. She saw him gesture towards the night sky, his movements appearing, even in the stark, unpitying lens of the camera, to be calm, unhurried, almost tender. She saw Grace, her small, trusting face turned upwards, her innocent silhouette achingly fragile. And then she saw it, the horrifying, irrefutable, soul-destroying truth. Victor, standing directly behind Grace's chair, his form sharp and distinct against the shimmering backdrop of the pool. The sudden, brutal, unconscionable shove, Grace's chair tipping. vanishing with sickening speed into the black, unforgiving water, her daughter's desperate, frantic, flailing struggle for life, a brief, terrible ballet of terror, hot, silent tears, born of a grief too profound for sound, streamed down Sarah's face, blurring the horrific images on the screen. She witnessed her husband, the man to whom she had entrusted her heart, her life, her most precious child, stand there, impassive, immobile, watching their daughter drown. He made no move to help. None. He simply observed, a cold, calculating voyeur to an imminent murder. A single, choked, agonizing sob was finally ripped from the very depths of her being, a sound of utter, irretrievable desolation. Then, a blur of motion from the edge of the frame. Cooper, a tawny, desperate streak of fur and fury, bursting onto the patio, launching himself with fearless abandon into the pool. The silent, impartial camera had captured every second of his frantic, heroic efforts, his powerful swim, his gentle yet firm grasp on Grace's pajamas, the desperate, agonizing struggle to tow her unresponsive form to the relative safety of the steps. The camera, a small, forgotten sentinel, had borne unwavering, silent witness to it all. Victor's meticulously planned, cold-blooded, almost successful act of unimaginable cruelty, and Cooper's pure, selfless, unwavering, courageous love. Sarah slid slowly to the cold, dusty floor of the shed. The small, incriminating monitor clutched tightly in her numb hands, her body racked with a grief so immense, so utterly devastating. It felt as if her very soul were being systematically, brutally shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The man she had married, the man she had once, however misguidedly, loved and trusted, was a monster, a cold, calculating, soulless murderer who had been thwarted in his heinous act not by any form of human intervention, but by the pure, unadulterated, selfless loyalty of a dog. Cooper, her hero, her beloved daughter's valiant, four-legged savior. The evidence, preserved on that tiny, innocuous data card, was irrefutable, unassailable, absolutely damning. When she finally, somehow, managed to stumble out of the shed, the first pale, anemic, almost apologetic rays of the new dawn were beginning to streak the eastern sky, painting the scene of the night's horrors in a flat, unforgiving light. Her face was ravaged by tears, yet beneath the devastation, a new, unfamiliar, chillingly grim resolve had begun to set, hardening her features into an unfamiliar mask of steely determination. Victor was still engaged with the police, his elaborate charade of the grieving, shocked stepfather apparently still holding. He looked up as she approached, his expression instantly morphing into one of carefully calibrated shared grief and solicitous concern. But he must have seen something new, something terrifyingly altered, in the depths of her eyes, for his carefully constructed composure visibly faltered, a sudden, unmistakable flicker of pure, cold, animalistic dread appearing in his own. Sarah offered him no words, no accusation, no sign of the cataclysmic knowledge she now possessed. She simply walked past him, her gaze fixed, her steps unnervingly steady, towards the lead detective who was meticulously overseeing the initial scene investigation. The small, almost weightless data card from the security camera clutched so tightly in her hand, it felt like a talisman of impending, inevitable justice. The truth, in all its stark, brutal, horrifying clarity, was about to be mercilessly laid bare. Grace, thanks to Cooper's incredible bravery, was alive, though her battle was far from over. She was in the intensive care unit at the hospital, her condition officially listed as critical but stable. Cooper, the true, silent, four-legged guardian of the Beaumont household, was being fussed over and gently tended to by a visibly moved and deeply sympathetic animal control officer. His remarkable bravery already the subject of hushed, awestruck whispers amongst the assembled emergency personnel. For Victor Beaumont, the elaborate, years-long charade was definitively, irrevocably over. Justice, swift, unyielding, and utterly merciless, was no longer an abstract, distant concept, but an imminent, terrifying, and wholly unavoidable reality. An official, intensive, and far-reaching investigation was about to commence, and Sarah knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep and cold within the marrow of her bones, that she, his betrayed and devastated wife, would be the one to light the fuse that would ultimately consume him. The choice before her was, in reality, no choice at all. Her incandescent, all-consuming maternal love, now transmuted into a righteous, avenging fury, demanded nothing less. The small, unassuming data card that Sarah Beaumont, her hand surprisingly steady amidst the maelstrom of her emotions, placed into the experienced, calloused palm of lead detective Miller was not merely a piece of technology. It was the cold, hard, undeniable harbinger of Victor Beaumont's doom. Later, in the sterile, humming interior of a mobile forensics van, the seasoned detective, a man whose career had been a long, grim education in the myriad facets of human depravity, watched the silent, monochrome footage unfold, his jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the small console. The chillingly methodical precision of Victor Beaumont's actions, the calculated, almost leisurely positioning of Grace's wheelchair, the brutal, decisive shove that sent the unsuspecting child into the inky depths, followed by his utterly impassive, almost reptilian observation as his small stepdaughter thrashed and drowned. It painted a portrait of malevolence so unequivocally stark, so profoundly disturbing, that no legal sophistry, however cunningly woven, could ever hope to obscure its horrifying truth. Cooper's subsequent, frantic, and undeniably heroic intervention, also captured with heartbreaking clarity, served only to cast Victor's monstrous inaction into even sharper, more damning relief. Victor Beaumont's arrest transpired later that same morning, as the first golden, impartial rays of the new day's sun began to illuminate the meticulously manicured, almost aggressively perfect lawns of his opulent lakeside estate. The transition from master of his universe to a man in chains was swift and notably devoid of the theatrical drama he so often meticulously cultivated. His carefully constructed mask of the grieving, shocked stepfather, already cracked by the icy, knowing resolve he'd seen in Sarah's eyes as she resolutely approached Detective Miller, finally, irrevocably shattered, when two stone-faced, uniformed officers, their expressions devoid of any discernible sympathy, formally informed him that he was being placed under arrest for the attempted murder of Grace Evangeline Allen and several counts of aggravated assault. A brief, reflexive flicker of his old, ingrained arrogance sparked. This is utterly preposterous, a grotesque misunderstanding, he'd blustered, his voice attempting its familiar timbre of command, but emerging as something thinner, laced with an ill-concealed tremor of panic. My daughter. Grace? There was a terrible, tragic accident. This is an outrage. But the cold, unyielding steel of the handcuffs as they ratcheted shut around his wrists, the stark, emotionless recitation of his Miranda rights, and, perhaps most damningly, the sight of Sarah standing a little ways off, her beautiful face a ruin of profound sorrow, yet underscored by an unshakable, almost terrifying strength, seemed to physically deflate him. The fight, the bluster, the innate belief in his own invincibility, visibly drained out of him, replaced by a dawning, incredulous, almost childlike terror. He looked, for the first time since Sarah had known him, Small. The news of Victor Beaumont's arrest exploded through their affluent, insular community like a well-aimed mortar shell, sending shockwaves that rippled far beyond its gilded confines. The philanthropic pillar of society, the effortlessly charming business magnate, the impeccably devoted family man, that meticulously crafted, carefully maintained public facade crumbled with astonishing speed under the relentless weight of the horrific, almost unbelievable accusations. His trial became a media circus of unprecedented proportions. The courtroom was packed to capacity daily, a grim theater for the unfolding drama, with news vans and satellite trucks forming a veritable siege encampment outside the courthouse. Victor, having managed to rally some of his characteristic bravado and leveraging what remained of his rapidly diminishing, accessible assets, retained a formidable, notoriously aggressive team of high-powered defense attorneys. They launched a desperate, multi-pronged assault, attempting to discredit the damning video footage as manipulated or taken out of context, attempting to paint Sarah as a vindictive, spurned wife seeking to destroy him, even stooping to subtly suggest that Grace herself, due to her known medical frailties, might have somehow precipitated her own fall in a moment of unfortunate, unwitnessed imbalance. But the silent, unwavering, irrefutable testimony of the birdhouse camera footage was a bulwark against which their frantic, increasingly desperate legal machinations shattered. Each frame, each horrifying, crystal-clear second, laid bare Victor's monstrous, premeditated intent with an objectivity that was both chilling and absolute. Cooper's heroic, desperate intervention, also captured in its entirety, served only to starkly underscore Victor's chilling, calculated inaction, his deliberate choice to let a child die. Sarah, when called to the stand, recounted the events with a quiet, dignified sorrow that resonated more powerfully than any theatrical outburst could have. Her testimony, detailing Victor's subtle but escalating campaign to isolate Grace, his manipulative suggestions of sending her away, and the horrifying discovery of the footage, was delivered with a trembling but resolute voice, her gaze occasionally, and with palpable pain, meeting Victor's across the courtroom. His eyes, she noted with a distant sort of chill, held not remorse, but a cold, simmering fury at being so thoroughly undone. The jury's unanimous guilty verdict on all charges was delivered after only a few hours of deliberation, the foreman's voice resonating with grim finality in the hushed, expectant courtroom. Victor Beaumont, his face ashen, his expensive suit suddenly appearing ill-fitting and clownish, his eyes hollow and darting like those of a trapped animal, finally, viscerally, understood the absolute totality of his ruin. The judge, a stern, experienced jurist known for her unswerving commitment to justice, in her sentencing remarks, cited the calculated, almost unimaginable cruelty of the defendant's actions, the egregious, predatory breach of sacred familial trust, and the profound, lasting trauma inflicted upon a vulnerable child. She sentenced him to the maximum term allowed by state law, a sentence that would ensure he would likely spend the remainder of his natural life behind cold prison walls. His name, once synonymous with success and societal grace, became an immediate, enduring byword for deceit, manipulation, and unthinkable evil. His once sprawling business empire, already teetering from the scandal, collapsed into insolvency and receivership. His reputation was not merely tarnished, it was utterly, irrevocably obliterated. His memory destined to be a cautionary tale, whispered in hushed, horrified tones. Justice, for Grace, though a cold comfort for the horrors she had endured, had been unequivocally, resoundingly served. Grace's arduous, painstaking journey back from the precipice of death was a quiet, deeply personal testament to the indomitable, resilient spirit that resided within her small, battered frame, and to the unwavering, unconditional love that formed a protective cocoon around her. She had, by some miracle of medicine and sheer will, survived. But the ordeal had left profound, indelible scars, both upon her fragile psyche and her still-developing body. The initial weeks in the pediatric intensive care unit were a terrifying, disorienting blur of beeping machines, hushed, urgent medical consultations outside her door, painful procedures, and the constant, terrifying, visceral thrum of a deep-seated anxiety that never quite receded. Aquaphobia, a stark, primal terror of water in any form, became an almost insurmountable daily torment. The mere sight of a glass of water, the sound of a running tap, the thought of rain, could trigger debilitating panic attacks that left her breathless and trembling. Nightmares, vivid, suffocating, and terrifyingly recurrent, relentlessly haunted the fragile sanctuary of her sleep, replaying those horrifying, endless moments in the cold, dark, suffocating embrace of the pool, Victor's shadowy, impassive form a recurring, monstrous presence on the periphery. Throughout this harrowing crucible, Cooper was her unwavering, steadfast anchor, after much impassioned, tearful pleading from Sarah, who understood with every fiber of her being the profound, irreplaceable solace the dog provided, and a surprisingly heartfelt, deeply insightful endorsement from Grace's lead attending physician, Dr. Anya Sharma, who recognized the almost symbiotic nature of their bond and its undeniable therapeutic potential. Special, unprecedented permission had been granted for Cooper to have extended visiting hours in the hospital. The moment the gentle, aging Labrador, his own healing wounds a visible testament to his bravery, was carefully escorted into Grace's sterile, impersonal hospital room, his tail beginning a slow, tentative thump against the polished linoleum floor. A tiny, almost imperceptible spark had rekindled in Grace's usually vacant, terrified eyes. He would lie patiently, his great head resting gently on the edge of her bed for hours on end, his warm, solid, reassuring presence a tangible bulwark against the myriad terrors that lurked in the shadowy corners of her traumatized mind. His soft, thick fur absorbed countless silent tears. His gentle, insistent nuzzles were a constant, unspoken reassurance of safety and unwavering love. He was, quite simply, her lifeline, her furry, four-legged guardian angel. Sarah, having finalized the cold, emotionally draining legal proceedings of her divorce from Victor with a speed and decisiveness that surprised even herself, dedicated every single waking moment, every ounce of her being, to Grace's recovery, the crushing weight of guilt she carried, for having allowed Victor Beaumont into their lives, for her own blindness in not discerning the manipulative monster lurking beneath the charming, sophisticated veneer, was a heavy, suffocating burden, but she learned, with Grace's quiet courage as her inspiration, to channel that corrosive guilt into an unshakable, fierce resolve to help her daughter heal, to reclaim the childhood that had been so brutally stolen from her. Through painstaking research and countless consultations, she found Dr. Elena Ramirez, a young, exceptionally gifted, and deeply compassionate child psychologist who specialized in complex trauma recovery. Serendipitously, Dr. Ramirez was also a lifelong, devoted animal lover and a passionate advocate for the then burgeoning field of animal-assisted therapy. She immediately recognized the extraordinary, profoundly therapeutic bond between Grace and Cooper and, with an innovative, intuitive insight that felt like a gift from heaven, skillfully integrated the gentle, patient Labrador into Grace's intensive therapy sessions. Cooper became more than just a pet. He became a vital, active participant in the healing process, a warm, non-judgmental bridge across the terrifying chasm of Grace's trauma, a safe, furry confidant to whom Grace could begin, haltingly at first, then with increasing confidence, to articulate her deepest fears, to process the unspeakable horrors she had endured, stroking his soft, familiar fur, feeling the steady, reassuring rhythm of his breathing beside her on the therapy room floor. Grace slowly, painstakingly, and with incredible courage, began to reclaim her voice, her trust, her fractured sense of self, her stolen childhood. The legal dissolution of her marriage to Victor, once finalized, felt to Sarah like the shedding of a diseased, corrupted skin. She had absolutely no intention of ever remarrying. Her life's purpose, her entire universe, was now singular, crystal clear Grace, and as Grace, with Cooper always by her side, grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. As the shadows of her trauma began, ever so slowly, to recede, a new, powerful, and deeply resonant purpose began to take root in Sarah's own healing heart. The unimaginable pain they had endured, the profound darkness they had been forced to navigate, would not be in vain. Together, as Grace blossomed into her teenage years, her quiet resilience now infused with a newfound, profound empathy for the suffering of others, they made a monumental, life-altering decision. They would transform their personal crucible of trauma into a shining, enduring beacon of hope for countless others. With the substantial financial settlement Sarah received from the divorce, and later, with a profound and deeply symbolic sense of poetic justice, a significant portion of Victor Beaumont's confiscated and liquidated assets, which the presiding judge, in a rare and compassionate ruling, ordered to be redirected as a form of tangible restitution, they established the Grace and Cooper Foundation for Hope. Its mission was ambitious, yet deeply personal and twofold: to provide comprehensive, compassionate support and vital resources for children who, like Grace, had suffered profound trauma or were battling life-threatening illnesses, and secondly, to champion, fund, and elevate the incredible, often unsung, work of animal rescue organizations and the burgeoning, evidence-based field of therapy animal programs. Cooper, already a legendary hero in their eyes and in the hearts of their local community, officially embarked on a new, deeply fulfilling chapter in his already extraordinary life. With the dedicated guidance and encouragement of Dr. Ramirez, he underwent rigorous, specialized training and became a fully certified, highly sought-after therapy dog. His inherently gentle, almost preternaturally calm demeanor, his remarkable, intuitive empathy, and his unwavering, boundless patience made him an exemplary candidate. He became a beloved, eagerly anticipated visitor not only in Grace's ongoing, though now less intensive, therapy sessions, but also in pediatric oncology wards, specialized children's hospitals, and centers for children with profound special needs. He brought with him an aura of quiet comfort, an uncanny ability to elicit smiles from the most withdrawn or pain-ridden children, and a unique, powerful, non-judgmental form of profound healing to countless other young, vulnerable lives. The deeply moving, almost mythical story of Grace and Cooper, of a little girl's incredible, tenacious fight for survival against unimaginable odds, and her extraordinarily courageous dog's unwavering devotion, began to resonate far beyond the confines of their immediate community. Capturing hearts and imaginations across the nation, they found themselves, somewhat unexpectedly, invited to share their remarkable journey at various conferences, fundraising events, and child advocacy summits. They spoke with quiet eloquence, raising crucial awareness about the insidious nature of child abuse, the profound, long-lasting impact of trauma, the incredible, often underestimated, resilience of the human spirit, and the immeasurable, scientifically validated therapeutic power inherent in the human-animal bond. The image of Grace, no longer a fragile, haunted victim, but a poised, articulate young woman radiating an aura of quiet strength, profound empathy, and an almost luminous hope, standing confidently beside her. Steadfast, ever-devoted Labrador became an instantly recognizable, deeply iconic symbol of survival, courage, and the enduring power of love against all odds. Years, laden with healing, purpose, and quiet joy, slipped by, the jagged, razor-sharp edges of Grace's trauma, though perhaps never entirely, completely erased from the tapestry of her being, had been softened, smoothed, and gently rounded by the passage of time. The unwavering constancy of unconditional love and the deep, abiding satisfaction of a life dedicated to purpose beyond oneself. Grace blossomed not just into a beautiful young woman, but into a compassionate, insightful, and deeply inspiring individual. She pursued her higher education with a quiet, fierce determination, her own experiences profoundly shaping her desire to dedicate her life to helping others navigate their own dark, treacherous passages. Cooper, his once glossy, golden muzzle now generously frosted with distinguished, noble gray, his once boundless, explosive energy now tempered by the graceful dignity of advanced age, remained her loyal, adoring shadow, his intelligent amber eyes, though perhaps a little dimmer, still bright and shining with an unwavering, unconditional devotion that transcended words. One crisp, vibrant autumn evening, under the warm, inviting glow of professionally arranged stage lights, an adult Grace, poised and confident, stood before a hushed, packed auditorium. It was the glittering, highly anticipated annual fundraising gala for the Grace and Cooper Foundation for Hope, an event that had become a landmark in their city's philanthropic calendar. Beside her, lying comfortably and with an air of serene proprietorship on a plush, specially provided rug, was Cooper, his occasional soft, contented snores eliciting gentle, affectionate chuckles from the assembled guests. In the front row, his eyes wide with undisguised adoration for his mother, sat Grace's young son, Noah, a bright-eyed, vivacious boy of 6, blessed with his mother's gentle smile and compassionate spirit. Beside him, her own eyes shining with an almost unbearable mixture of pride, love, and a lingering, bittersweet memory of the darkness they had overcome, sat Sarah. Grace paused, her gaze sweeping warmly over the sea of supportive, expectant faces, finally coming to rest, with an expression of infinite tenderness, on her beloved, aging canine companion. A soft, ineffably tender smile illuminated her face. "Tonight," she began, her voice clear, strong, and resonant, carrying effortlessly to the furthest corners of the grand hall, "we gather to celebrate the enduring power of hope, the incredible strength of resilience, and the transformative, boundless magic of love. Many of you here tonight know my story, our story." She reached down, her hand gently, lovingly stroking Cooper's velvety, silver-streaked ear. "Cooper," she continued, her voice momentarily catching with emotion, "didn't just save my physical life that one terrifying, dark night in the cold waters of the pool. All those many years ago, in the countless challenging days, the difficult months, and the often painful years that followed, he did something even more profound. He painstakingly, patiently, and with unwavering devotion, saved my spirit. He taught me, by his very presence, how to trust again when trust seemed impossible. He showed me how to find moments of simple, unadulterated joy even when joy felt like a forgotten language. He demonstrated, every single day, the pure, uncomplicated meaning of unconditional love. And perhaps most importantly, he taught me, and continues to teach me, that even in the deepest, most suffocating darkness, hope, true hope, never truly, fully abandons us." Cooper, sensing the familiar, emotional shift in her tone, The well-loved cadence of their shared, often told story lifted his great, gray head, nudged her hand with his wet nose, and let out a soft, contented woof, a sound that seemed to resonate with perfect, heartfelt agreement. The audience, deeply moved, erupted in a spontaneous, sustained, and overwhelmingly heartfelt ovation, a powerful wave of warmth, admiration, and shared emotion washing over the stage. Grace's smile widened, her eyes glistening. "He's my hero." Her voice now thick with unshed tears, but firm with conviction. "What do you think about this story? Did it leave you heartbroken, hopeful, or maybe just angry at how far some people will go? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and let's talk about it. And if stories like this move you, shock you, or make you believe in the strength of the smallest hearts, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next.